Quiet on set. Speed. And action.
I know it was you, Fredo. You broke my heart.
You know how to whistle, don't you? You just put your lips together and blow.
Welcome to the Foot and Friends on Film podcast, discussing everything about cinema. Now here's your host, Nick Baylor.
What's in the bar?
Houston, we have a problem.
You can't handle the truth.
I'm not what she said. Crazy.
Welcome to the official podcast of Foot and Friends on Film.com, where we discuss everything about cinema. I'm your host, Nick Baylor. On today's episode, we're discussing a two-time Academy Award-winning actor, an absolute legend, Mr. Denzel Washington. Going to be going through the whole filmography, myself and John. Any of our regular listeners, by now, you know the drill. So take your seats and grab your popcorn. It's time for your feature presentation. As I said, we are the official podcast of Foot and Friends on Film.com, where our motto is, any film you haven't seen is a new experience. We're talking about Mr. Denzel Washington today. You guys know the drill. Let's get the big man on the phone. Please welcome John H. Foote. There are few actors who are instantly recognizable by their first name alone, but when I say the name Denzel, you all know who I'm talking about, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So before we jump into his filmography, just any first initial thoughts on the man, Mr. Washington?
I think he's one of the most gifted actors we have. I think he's been among the best working for years. And when he exploded into movies, as he did in the 1980s, it was no surprise. He'd been a major supporting character on a brilliant TV show called St. Elsewhere, a medical drama. And you could just see the charisma, the gifts, the talent just pouring off of him in that. So when he made the transition to film, was no doubt he was going to be a big star. And he's been a big star for nearly 40 years.
Yeah, two-time Academy Award winner, and we all love him, so let's dive right in. The first film listed on his filmography from 1981 is called Carbon Copy.
And he told me that this is one he'd like to forget. He said, the things we do to break into the industry. And this is one of those things. It's supposed to be a comedy. It was very unfunny. I chose it as one of my 10 worst films of the year that year. George Segal, it was kind of his last gasp at the semblance of a film career, but a movie Denzel is embarrassed to have made, embarrassed to have been a part of.
All right, in 1984, the second entry on his filmography is called A Soldier's Story.
Yeah, this was based on a play called A Soldier's Play, and Norman Jewison directed the film, and he cast Denzel in the same role that he'd played on Broadway. People don't realize Denzel Washington moves easily between the stage and movies. He's done a ton of plays that we'll talk about near the end. And in this film, he plays Private First Class Melvin Peterson, who understands exactly what the sergeant is. It's set in the ranks of the black soldiers during the Second World War, and there's been a murder. And the black officer is sent to investigate who did the killing. And I won't ruin the ending, but it turns out it was not a white man who did it. And Peterson is this intensely angry black man who is disgusted by any other black man who's ashamed to be a black man. And it's a real riveting piece of acting from Denzel Washington. And I was shocked he wasn't nominated for Best Supporting Actor. The film was critically acclaimed, did very well at the box office, and Denzel got rave reviews for his performance, probably the best reviews in the film. So it was a great film in every way. And kind of forged a friendship with Norman Jewison. They were going to make Malcolm X for years. And it was eventually made by a different director with Denzel's blessing.
In 1986, he appeared in a film called Power.
Yeah, he jumped at the chance to work with Sidney Lumet, as just about every actor does. And exactly as it sounds, he plays a power broker in New York City. Very wealthy, very rich, very powerful, very corrupt man who shows the ropes to some naive innocents who think that they're going to do the right thing in this world of corruption. a good movie, not a great movie, not one of Sidney Lumet's masterpieces, but Denzel Washington said he learned a ton about movie making from Sidney Lumet. And the thing he liked best about Lumet was 1, 2 takes, move on. Get it in 2, move on. He worked fast, he worked cheap, he worked economical, and he was smart. He was a whip smart filmmaker, and Washington really admired that.
Denzel Washington is known for portraying several real life and historical characters. And the first example of that is a 1987 film called Cry Freedom.
I've got mixed feelings about Cry Freedom because, make no mistake, Washington is brilliant as Stephen Biko, the South African activist who fought apartheid and fought the intense corruption of the government in South Africa. But Richard Attenborough directed it, and that spells disaster for just about everything. And it's another one of those movies that explores the white guy saving the black guy, which they don't need saving. They've been fighting a battle for years and doing just fine. But it's seen through the eyes of Donald Woods, the writer who exposed Biko's murder and his fight. And Woods is played by Kevin Kline, who's a wonderful actor, and he's good in the movie. But Denzel Washington walks away with every single scene he's in. He's magnificent in this movie. Dignified, classy, poetic, honest, and burning with intensity, which are all trademarks to the best work of Denzel Washington. And it landed him his first Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. And he mastered that brutal South African accent. It's one of the hardest accents to master. And he spoke it like he'd been speaking it all of his life. And again, I struggle with the movie. I'm not a big fan of Richard Attenborough at all. And I think he told the movie the wrong way. I would have liked to see an entire film based on just Stephen Biko. But what we got was what we got, and it was very good. Washington elevates the film in every way.
You're bang on about the South African accent. Now, there's different variations for whites and blacks depending on who's doing it, but it is absolutely, I consider myself pretty adept at changing my voice, and it's one that just has caused me no end of trouble. It's really, really hard. So anytime an actor can pull that off, it's definitely a testament to how good they are.
Yeah, my oldest daughter is a master of dialect. She can pick up anything. And she amazed me one night when she slipped into South African, and she said, "It's the hardest thing I've ever done, Dad."
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about Glory. We've mentioned it on a few previous episodes, but let's dive in.
I think Glory is one of the great war films ever made. Edward Zwick chose to make a film about the Black Regiment from the North, from Massachusetts, that fought in the Civil War. And everybody thought they would be pickup men. They would pick up bodies, they would run errands, they would do menial labor. And instead, they were whipped into a fighting unit by Lieutenant Shaw, played by Matthew Broderick in the film. And in the movie, Denzel Washington plays Trip, a runaway slave who fights for no one. He's fighting because he's angry. He knows that things will be just the same when the entire war is over, but he wants to fight. He wants to kill. He wants to get in there. And the whole movie is his journey about becoming part of something, part of a family. And at the end of the film, as they gather around the night before the big battle, that's exactly what he says to them, that they are the onlyest family he has. And it's a really riveting performance from Denzel Washington. Matthew Broderick is excellent. Morgan Freeman is terrific in the movie. It's a flawless film on many, many levels, and shockingly was not nominated for Best Picture or Director. It did receive 5 nominations. Denzel Washington won the Oscar that year for Best Supporting Actor and finished second in the balloting for the New York Film Critics Award. So it's a major piece of acting for him. And the movie that really put him on the map as an actor. He was an A-list actor after this film.
Afterwards, in 1990, he starred in Heart Condition.
Yeah, we all make mistakes, as he said. And this was one of them. Just not a great film at all. He did work that year with Spike Lee in a film called Mo Better Blues, and developed a friendship and a long relationship with Spike Lee that exists to this day.
Yeah.
A good movie about music, a good movie about jazz.
In 1991, he appeared in Ricochet.
Yeah, Ricochet is a strange little movie, and I sometimes wonder why he made it. It details a struggle between an LA district attorney, played by Washington, and a vengeful criminal, played by John Lithgow, who had been arrested by Denzel Washington's character when he was a cop. And it's a conflict about the two of them, a tug of war between them. And it just, to me, it lacked real intensity. It lacked drama. It lacked commitment from the actors. These are two great actors. John Lithgow is known for his comedic roles in that silly sitcom he did on TV, and you know some of the roles he's played in film. But when he plays a villain, as he did in Blowout, as he did in season 3 of Dexter, and as he does in this movie, he is absolutely terrifying. And he just doesn't have that bite this time or that intensity. And frankly, neither did Denzel.
1992, arguably the most famous, or one of the most famous roles Denzel Washington is known for. You mentioned it briefly. Malcolm X finally got made.
It did, and Spike Lee stepped forward, as Spike is prone to do, and made clear that a black director should be directing Malcolm X, because what does a white man know about the black experience? And he met with Norman Jewison, with Denzel Washington, and Jewison agreed. He said, you know what, you're absolutely right, do it, but do it right. And he did it right. He cast Denzel Washington, who was probably attached to the film long before they even started making it. And I think this still, you know, all these years later, is still his greatest performance. I think it was the best performance of the year by far. And the New York Film Critics honored him with their award for Best Actor. He was nominated for an Oscar and famously lost to Al Pacino, hoo-ha, in Scent of a Woman, which disgusts me on so many levels, that they would go with a piece of acting tripe like that over Denzel's performance for the ages. You put a documentary of Malcolm X on the screen and the Malcolm X film running beside it, and I defy anybody to tell the difference, truly. He nails the mannerisms, the speech pattern, the movement, the looks, that glare, that baleful, hateful glare. It's just a stunning achievement on every level. And so is the film. It wasn't, as Spike Lee declared at the press screening, the greatest movie ever made. Talk about putting pressure on yourself. But it was certainly one of the 5 best films I saw in 1992, and was horribly, horribly snubbed by the Academy. But the biggest snub of all was Denzel not winning Best Actor. He absolutely deserved it.
We've talked a lot about Scent of a Woman. I actually enjoy the film. I'm not going to say that you're wrong about Pacino in it. And for the record, I 100% agree that this Oscar definitely should have gone to Denzel Washington for Malcolm X. No disagreement whatsoever. And you're bang on. Like, it's uncanny, the resemblance. He absolutely nailed it.
Yeah, he did. He did.
1993, he appeared in Kenneth Branagh's adaptation of Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing.
Yeah, Kenneth Branagh early in his career made a lot of great Shakespeare films, Henry V, and this one, Much Ado About Nothing. And Washington plays Don Pedro of Aragon, and is very good. It's very funny. It it bounces. The one thing I like about Branagh's Shakespearean films is they're alive. The early Shakespeare films with Olivier, people stood around and spouted this iambic pentameter, and because they spoke it cleanly and crisply, it was considered great acting. Well, bullshit. It wasn't. And Laurence Olivier, I mean, is the most overrated buffoon in the history of the movies. Kenneth Branagh gave Shakespeare life, and that's what Shakespeare needs. His writing is alive. It is bouncy. It's sexy. It's dangerous. It's dirty in some cases, and often very, very funny. And this movie is firing on all cylinders all the way through. Denzel Washington has just finished Macbeth with Joel Coen and Frances McDormand, and he plays Macbeth, and I cannot wait to see that. I'm betting it wins him an Academy Award.
Oh, yeah. Well, awesome. Looking forward to that. Yeah, I don't... as an actor, I have the bare bones minimum experience with Shakespeare. I've only done one play, which was A Midsummer Night's Dream, but I agree with you 100% about bringing life into it. And I found that in my experience, like, first you got to, get the text, you got to memorize it, but you got to translate it, and you got to realize the nuances of everything you're saying. And the trick is to match that iambic pentameter and try to make it real and bounce. And this film does it. I love Kenneth Branagh. Moving on, in 1993, we've got The Pelican Brief.
Really entertaining movie directed by one of my favorite directors, Alan J. Pakula. One of his last movies, actually. And he's teamed here with Julia Roberts. And it's based on the book by John Grisham, which immediately makes it a box office success. People love Grisham books, they love Grisham movies. And he had a great time making the movie with Julia Roberts. They became good friends, and they've got a real nice chemistry on screen, an easygoing chemistry that lacks sex, which is good because why can't people be friends? And it's a thriller, a typical legal thriller. And Washington is rock solid as the leading man, and it just kind of upped the ante for him as a leading man. It showed that he could do mainstream work. He didn't have to do important films all the time, but important work was what he wanted to be doing. So it was a fun movie, made a ton of money, and furthered the star of each of the lead actors.
And speaking of important work, that same year, Philadelphia.
I like this movie a lot. I love Tom Hanks' performance, but I will never understand how Tom Hanks could win the Oscar and Denzel could not be nominated. One can't do what they did without the other. And Hanks said that more or less in his acceptance speech. Denzel Washington plays Joe Miller, who's a homophobic lawyer who, when Andrew Beckett stumbles into his office looking for representation, he's horrified by him. He's a homosexual. He's got AIDS. To him, he's a danger. He's a walking pariah. And yet he admires his guts. He admires his sand. And when he finds him in a library working by himself to represent himself, and he's embarrassed by the librarian to go work in a quiet room, Washington takes his case. And something very interesting happens between the two of them. They become friends. They become colleagues. And they both become better people for their friendship with each other. And Hanks, no question, Hanks gave a brilliant performance. He deserved the Academy Award, but he was bolstered in every way by Denzel Washington's performance and his character arc. Denzel should have been nominated with this movie too.
Yeah, I completely agree. 1995, we have Crimson Tide.
Really good movie, directed by Tony Scott, who Denzel worked with often through the course of his career till Scott's death. And this is a submarine thriller, and was really... Personally, it was really hard for me to watch because I am intensely claustrophobic, and closed-in spaces like this would just wig me out. I'd be in a rubber room within 10 minutes of that sub diving. And he engineers a mutiny and takes command of the sub from Gene Hackman. And then there's a tug of war between the two factors, those following Denzel, those following Gene Hackman. And it's a thriller. It's a very powerful thriller and shows the abject terror of being in a submarine as it's falling. If it goes below a certain depth in the ocean, it'll implode. The ocean will just crush it, and everyone on board will be dead in a millisecond, really. Great visual effects, great sound effects, a good score. Some of the dialogue was written by Quentin Tarantino, who took no credit for it, and Denzel was terrific. He went toe-to-toe with Gene Hackman, which very few people do and live to tell about it. But he did, and did great work.
He appeared in 3 movies that year, the second of which was Virtuosity.
Yeah, Virtuosity was kind of I honestly don't know why he did it. It was kind of a lark. It starred a very early Russell Crowe before LA Confidential, and had a pretty high budget for the time, 30 million, but it only made 24 million at the box office. So it's considered a flop. He's searching for a Sid, which is a sadistic, intelligent, dangerous serial killer. And that's really the entire plot. He's looking for this guy for most of the movie, and indeed finds him. It does have a happy ending. It's a very dark movie. It's been compared to Seven, of all films, which I just don't understand that at all. Seven is a masterpiece. Virtuosity is entertaining, but deeply, deeply flawed. And overall, to me, just was not a great experience at the movies. I've seen it once. I saw it when it opened back in '95. I haven't seen it since.
Once was enough.
Yep, had no desire to see it again. Wasn't bad, just wasn't for me.
The third film he appeared in 1995 was Devil in a Blue Dress.
Yeah, this is a great film. It's based on a series of books, Walter Mosley's novel of the same name, and the character Easy Rawlins. And it featured Denzel Washington, Tom Sizemore, Jennifer Beals, and Don Cheadle. And Easy Rawlins is a World War II veteran who's been unfairly laid off from an airline manufacturer. So he becomes a private investigator because he has to do something to pay the mortgage. And he falls into a dangerous world, a dangerous plot that puts him in peril throughout the movie. And he spends most of the film getting in and out of trouble. The best reviewed performance in the film was Don Cheadle, who many thought would get an Oscar nomination for his work. He didn't. But Washington is perfect as Easy Rollins. He's everything the writer wanted him to be. And Carl Franklin, the filmmaker, really enjoyed working with Denzel in the movie. They hope to work together again, but it hasn't happened.
In '96, Denzel reunited with Edward Zwick for Courage Under Fire.
Yeah, this is based on a true story, directed by Zwick, and featured Washington with Meg Ryan. And Meg Ryan, I must say, it's a supporting role, and it deals with the Gulf War. And Lieutenant Colonel Serling, Denzel Washington, accidentally destroys one of his own tanks during a confusing nighttime battle, which kills his friend. The Army covers up the details and transfer him to a desk job, and he's assigned to determine if Captain Karen Emma Walden, played by Meg Ryan, should be the first woman to posthumously receive the Medal of Honor. So he goes and he does his research and investigates that, yes, she should indeed receive the Medal of Honor. She was a fighting machine and hugely courageous. And we see Meg Ryan in flashback. He never actually met the woman. And it's an interesting look at how a soldier would decide how another soldier should receive this prestigious award, the highest in the military. And it's a good performance. It's a really good performance from both of them. I wish they had connected somehow on screen, because I think, sparks might have flown between the two of them. I think they would have had a real crackling chemistry.
That same year, he worked with Penny Marshall on The Preacher's Wife.
Yeah, how to be honest, this movie sucks. That's the best way to say it. It stars Denzel with Whitney Houston, who should never have ever become an actor, and Courtney B. Vance. It's a remake of the 1947 film The Bishop's Wife, which in turn was based on the novel of the same name by Robert Nathan. It did receive one Academy Award nomination for Best Score. The world would be a better place had it never been made. It's just awful. Denzel is not a romantic leading man. There has to be an edge to the romance in a Denzel Washington film. He can't make rom-coms very easily. And this one was just brutal. Whitney Houston should never have ever acted in a film. I hated The Bodyguard. I hated everything she ever did as an actress. Great singer, great voice, but the lady could not act. She's in the same boat as Madonna. Why Denzel did this, I don't know. I
think Whitney Houston has better pipes than Madonna did.
Okay, fair enough.
But no, I get what you're saying, totally. So in 1998, we have a film called Fallen.
This was not a bad movie. It's a supernatural detective thriller, and good cast. Denzel Washington, John Goodman, Donald Sutherland, Mbath Devads, James Gandolfini, and Elias Koteas. And the opening voiceover gets you started. I want to tell you about the time I almost died. And from then on, we're following Denzel Washington as he tries to figure out who's killing people or who killed who. And it's very good. One of the most alarming scenes in the film is his visit to the serial killer, Edgar Reese, played by Elias Koteas, who's a character actor, and most people would recognize him when they see him, but they may not know him by name.
Right.
It's a pretty decent movie and goes in places where I'm not sure audiences were ready to go, but it worked for me. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't know that the director's done much since, but he certainly did a good job with this one.
I remember liking this movie. I think I'd forgotten it existed for a while, but in doing my research for this podcast, I took a look at it, and yeah, I remember watching it with my dad, and I love John Goodman, and it totally worked for me too.
Yep, it's one of those ones I saw when it came out. I probably watched it again on video or DVD with Sherry because she was a supernatural nut, and it just went away after that. But thinking back on it, I did like it quite a lot.
When my buddy, gentleman Josh Hill, was on the podcast, he talked about his favorite sports movies, and this next one was on the list. He Got Game.
Yeah, Denzel works again with Spike Lee. The plot revolves around Jake Shuttlesworth, played by Denzel, who is the father of the top-ranked basketball prospect in the country. And Jake is in prison for killing his wife, and he's released on parole for a week by the state governor to persuade his son to play for the governor's alma mater in exchange for a reduced sentence. So corruption right from the get-go by the warden. And it's about a father and a son, essentially connecting through basketball, through a sport. And I think all fathers and sons have something they connect through. My father and I connected through movies. My dad's a movie junkie and got me turned on to movies very quickly. In this movie, it's basketball, and it works on every level. It's a great performance from Denzel, nicely directed by Spike Lee. It wasn't as successful as I think everybody hoped it would be, but a solid piece of filmmaking.
Yeah, I like it. I'm a sucker for movies about fathers and sons. For me and my dad, it was the Beatles more than anything. He was a Liverpool boy, and he pushed it into me like gospel. So any movie that successfully does the father-son thing, it gets me pretty easily. That same year, Denzel appeared in another Edward Zwick film, The Siege.
This was a good movie. It's about a terrorist attack on New York City, and this was made before 9/11. And Denzel plays an FBI special agent who, with his Lebanese partner, intervene at a hijacking of a bus loaded with passengers, which contains an explosive. And it turns out to be a paint bomb, and the terrorists escape. But he hunts them down, and he finds out that all is not as it seems at all. And it co-stars Bruce Willis, who's very good in the film, and Annette Bening, who's excellent in the film. But it's Denzel's movie. He's a commanding performance, a really powerful performance, and an interesting study of terrorism. Terrorism fascinates me, and you know how they hit 9/11, how they made that happen, is quite something. And we get insight into that through this, which is interesting, alarming but interesting.
Let's talk about The Bone Collector.
Probably the nicest thing I can say about this is it's a crime thriller. It works on every level. The acting's very good. Denzel is convincing as a quadriplegic forensics expert, and Angelina Jolie is terrific as a young cop. They are searching for a serial killer, and because he's a genius forensics expert, despite not having the use of his arms and his legs, they do eventually find him. It's a thriller, top to bottom thriller. Nicely directed by Philip Noyce, who's a really good director in the right, doing the right role. It made about $160 million, so it was a box office hit. Critics didn't think as well of it as audiences did, but I remember going to see it. Sherry loved it, me not so much.
Very popular film in 1999, directed by Norman Jewison, is the story of Reuben Hurricane Carter. The movie's called The Hurricane. I really like this movie. Denzel is brilliant in it. I read Reuben Carter's biography when I was in high school. The movie is very fast and loose with a lot of the facts, but
Sure is. It is fast and loose with the facts, and that's one of the problems I had with it. I had no problem with his performance. I thought he captured who Reuben Carter was on every level. I thought it's a brilliant, brilliant performance. And he's got a great line. I'm going to paraphrase it, but he talks about how hate put him in prison, but love was going to set him free.
Yeah, love's going to bust me out, he said.
Yeah. Where I really struggle with the movie is, again, we have a group of white people saving the black man. And Norman Jewison's a good director. I know Norman Jewison. He's a nice man. He's a truly dedicated, honest, and a great director with integrity. And I don't know why he messed with the facts like he did. He didn't need to. It's a great story. It's an incredible story. And yet he messed with the facts. That said, Denzel Washington gives a towering performance as Reuben Carter. He won the Golden Globe for Best Actor that year. He was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actor. One of his better performances, one of his best performances, I dare say.
I mentioned this little piece of movie trivia in a previous episode, but I have to bring it up again. In the movie The Hurricane, Denzel Washington, portraying Reuben Carter, is in prison, and in his prison cell is a poster of Malcolm X, and that poster of Malcolm X is Denzel Washington as Malcolm X.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting little breaking of the fifth wall there, but also a testament to how brilliant Washington was as Malcolm X.
Pretty brave move on the part of Norm Jewison, too,
Yeah. Continuing this tradition of playing real-life characters as he did with Reuben Carter, there's going to be more on the list. The next film we're going to talk about again was mentioned my buddy Josh's favorite sports movies. Remember the Titans?
Yeah, in this movie, he plays the African American football coach Herman Boone, who in 1971 attempted to integrate the high school football team, the T.C. Williams high school football team in Alexandria, Virginia. The South, even to this day, contains racist, hateful, horrible human beings that we realize Donald Trump embraced. We saw that when he was elected. Boone believes that football players are football players, and it doesn't matter the color of their skin. He tries to get them all together, and his life is made a living hell for it, but he believes in it, and he gets his assistant coach over to his side as well. And it's a really moving, powerful film about the power of sports, about how sports can and have changed everything, absolutely everything. And it's a great performance from Denzel Washington. It was a very popular film, made a ton of money, was produced by Disney, of all things, and made over 115 million bucks, I think, which is not too shabby at all. And it's often listed as one of the best football films ever made, which I completely agree with.
Yeah, there's an interesting irony with me. I'm not a huge sports fan. I like my hockey. I'm loyal to my the national Canadian team and my Toronto Maple Leafs. And my dad, who was an Englishman, he embraced hockey when he came to Canada. I'm not a big fan of boxing or football or any of these other sports, but man, I love movies about them, especially when they're done really well. And this is a great example of that.
Yeah, when they're done well, they're terrific. One of the best films about hockey I've ever seen was Miracle, about the U.S. team in 1980 winning the gold medal. And an absolute underdog. The Russian Red Army was the best team on the planet. And this little group of high schoolers and college kids beat them. And it's a beautifully directed film and incredible performance from Kurt Russell. Yeah,
there's a lot of interesting parallels in sports movies and in war movies.
There are, and life in general. You know, a sports movie is life. There's winners, there's losers.
Let's talk about Training Day.
Again, mixed feelings on Training Day. It's a good movie. It's nicely directed, and Denzel Washington, for the first time in his career, plays a real villain. He's Alonzo Harris, who is a dirty narcotics officer who, over the course of a single day with his new partner, sets him up in every way. He gets him to try crack cocaine, so now there's blood in his, or his blood is filled with crack. He sets him up, and there are murders, there are killings. Alonzo is on the take. He's making money off of these people and loving every minute of it. Is Washington great in the movie? No. Is he very good? Yes, he is. And even a little over the top, I would say. You know, King Kong ain't got nothing on me. He roars with just a little bit too much glee. You know, watch me, I'm playing a bad guy. It was 2001. He should have had 2 Academy Awards for Best Actor by now. He was nominated. The LA Film Critics have given him Best Actor. There's no way the Oscars are not going to give him Best Actor. But think of the setup and the irony for that night. Sidney Poitier wins an honorary Oscar for his contribution to movies. Halle Berry wins Best Actress for Monsters Ball. And then Denzel wins Best Actor for Training Day. It's almost too good to be true. But that's exactly what happened on Oscar night.
Who should have gotten Best Actor?
Gene Hackman in The Royal Tenenbaum, no question.
All right. What are your thoughts on John Q?
This one's kind of special to me because I spent a lot of time on the set of John Q. I was interviewing Robert Duvall quite a lot, and he invited me to come on set with him and watch John Q being made. And I arrived on set, and the director, Nick Cassavetes, treated me as a celebrity, which was ridiculous. I'm surrounded by Denzel Washington, Ray Liotta, Robert Duvall, and Nick himself. And I was treated like royalty. And I got to watch them make the movie. Most of it was Robert Duvall's scenes, but I did see a few shot with Denzel, and it was interesting to watch his process. Very different from Duvall's, yet every bit as dedicated, every bit as focused, and ready to go, ready to do anything. Improvisation is something he's very strong at, though he prefers to stick to the script, but he can certainly go off book if he needs to. It's got an interesting story. It's about the healthcare crisis in the US, and a father who has been waiting on an artificial heart for his son can wait no more. The boy's going to die. So he takes hostages and demands that they find a heart for his son right then and there, even to the point he's prepared to shoot himself in the head so they can take his heart and transplant it. And it raises a lot of interesting questions. It's a little sentimental. It's a little over the top in terms of being sappy. And Denzel Washington has a single scene with Robert Duvall. And I'd really like to have seen them go at it on screen together, because I think it would have been terrific. But overall, it's a pretty decent movie.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. God damn you and your awesome stories. In 2002, that same year, Denzel acted as star, director, and producer in Antoine Fisher.
Yeah, this was a movie that was close to his heart. It's a biographical film, and he portrays a psychiatrist, Jerome Davenport, alongside a Hollywood newcomer, Derek Luke, who plays the lead role in the film, and who knew Antoine Fisher. He was a friend of Antoine Fisher's. And the story is about Antoine, a temperamental young guy with a violent history, who is serving in the US Navy. And the psychiatrist digs into Antoine's past and finds years of physical and emotional abuse at the hands of a woman, and then was molested by her adult daughter, Nadine. And they pick through this and find out why he's so angry, why he has such an explosive temper. They find out why everything in his life is so filled with rage. And it's a really powerful movie. It was a rock solid directing debut from Denzel, and a really strong performance from young Derek Luke and Denzel himself as a psychiatrist. And quite generous of him to be a supporting actor to a leading actor in a movie where he wasn't the lead character. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. This next movie I forgot existed until this moment, but I do remember seeing it, Out of Time.
Out of Time is a cool movie, and it's a mainstream thriller, really, and that's the nicest thing to say about it. Matt Whitlock is the respected chief of police in a Florida Keys town in Banyan Key in the state of Florida. He's separated from his wife. He's currently seeing a local resident and an old flame from high school. And while attending to a doctor, Whitlock finds out that she has been diagnosed with terminal cancer. So he's also going through divorce from his wife, a homicide detective, and it's just a complete nightmare of who's going to get what, who's going to do this, who's going to help who. Anne intends to reward Whitlock's loyalty by making him the sole beneficiary of a $1 million life insurance policy. Whitlock suggests she should travel to Switzerland to undergo a newly developed operation that might give her some further life. He steals $480,000 out of evidence and gives it to her so she can make the trip. And when it goes up in flames in a house fire, he's on the hook for the money. So it's a pretty powerful movie. It's got some great ideas in it. Does it work all together? No, it doesn't quite work all together as a whole. And seeing Dean Cain play a tough guy, to me, was laughable, because he's just not a tough guy. But Denzel was great. Good story. Okay film.
In 2004, we got another collaboration with Tony Scott, a film called Man on Fire.
Yeah, this movie kicks ass. Denzel plays John Creasy, who's an alcoholic former Special Activities Division from the U.S. Marine Corps, who is now a bodyguard. And he goes on a revenge rampage after the little girl he's guarding, 9-year-old Peta, played by Dakota Fanning, is abducted in Mexico City. The moment she's abducted, he starts going on a rampage looking for people, because he knows every hour she's away, she could be closer to death. And he's a take no prisoners kind of guy. He beats, he maims, he kills anyone on his way to finding this little girl. The relationship between he and Dakota Fanning is quite beautiful to watch. She calls him Creasy, and she knows he's coming for him. She tells her captors, you better watch out, because he's coming for me, and he does. And Washington is just like a force of nature in this movie, a nonstop killing machine. it reminded me of what he did later. When I saw The Equalizer, to me it seemed to be almost the same character, and The Equalizer 2 as well. Neither of them great movies, but the same performance he gave in Man on Fire, which is infinitely watchable and a real classic piece of acting from Denzel.
It's real fun watching Denzel be a badass.
It is. It is. He's so good at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about The Manchurian Candidate.
This was a remake of a 1962 film, kind of a classic John Frankenheimer movie, based on the Richard Condon novel. And it deals with, it's a psychological political thriller that deals with mind shaping. And something happened to Ben Marco, played by Denzel, during the war. And his friend, Sergeant Raymond Shaw, was also damaged during the war. And we find out that they have been brainwashed by forces seeking great, great power in the government after the war. And one of them turns out to be Liev Schreiber's mother, played by Meryl Streep. And Streep based her character on Hillary Clinton. And she's an ice cold, ice water in the veins, power hungry maniac. And it's a solid thriller. It was really, really well put together by Jonathan Demme. Is it as good as the original? No, because the original was showing us all of this for the very first time. But still, rock solid piece of entertainment. Washington is great. Streep is terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And Liev Schreiber is wonderful. Usually when brainwashing kicks in, they go into this monotone, almost robotic-like behavior. Liev Schreiber had a great idea. What if he became instantly euphoric when he heard the code on the phone? And that's what he does. And it's terrifying. It's really terrifying to watch. Great movie.
Next film we're going to talk about from 2006, another collaboration with Spike Lee. I absolutely love this movie, Inside Man.
There's a lot to like. Spike made a good movie. He made a mainstream bank heist movie, and got some great people in it. Clive Owen is the mastermind who orchestrates the whole thing. Jodie Foster is a Manhattan power broker who becomes involved at the request of the bank's founder. And Denzel Washington is the cop seeking to find out where it all goes, where it all leads. And nothing goes where you think it's going to go. This movie goes in directions that totally caught me off guard. But it was wildly entertaining, beautifully acted by everybody. Christopher Plummer is downright frightening, and I don't think anybody plays a badass like Chris Plummer does, like a first-class prick. And he's so good at it. His arrogance is just overwhelming. A good movie. I was really surprised this didn't do better come Oscar time. But Spike's got that history with the Oscars, and it's not going to go away.
It's interesting that the shameful upset over the best actor, Malcolm X versus Scent of a Woman, in this movie, which the setup is a lot like Dog Day Afternoon, but they're wildly different films. There's a lot of homages and references to Al Pacino in it.
Spike's a fan. He's a big fan of Al Pacino.
That same year, he appeared in Deja Vu, another film directed by Tony Scott.
Yeah, this was interesting. I saw this at TIFF, which seemed to me to be an odd place to be seeing a Tony Scott film, but it worked. They shot it in New Orleans just after Hurricane Katrina, so they shot it among some pretty intense wreckage. And is it a great movie? No, it's never a great movie. Tony Scott never made a great movie, but he made wildly entertaining and exciting movies. And in this one, Washington plays Douglas Carlin, who is from the Bureau of Tobacco, Alcohol, Firearms, and Explosives, who was sent to investigate a bomb that's been planted by a domestic terrorist. And it's a very real study of terrorism. It's a very real study of how such things impact everybody, but especially the innocents who are on the boat. Does it bend time and shift time a little bit? Yes, it does. And it works. It's exciting that way. There's a supernatural element to it that I quite liked. But I have to be honest, I saw the film once. The only time I've seen it was at TIFF. I've never seen it again or since.
I remember being in your class when I was your student, and you had a couple of passes to American Gangster to hand out, and you asked the class, first one to tell me the last movie to sweep the Oscars in the major categories wins, and guess who won? It was me. So American Gangster, that always reminds me of it. But so he worked with Tony Scott's brother, Ridley Scott, again, working with Russell Crowe. This is a badass movie.
It's a great movie. He plays Frank Lucas, who was a real life guy, and at one point was the largest distributor of cocaine and heroin in the United States. And again, Denzel's playing a villain, but he's so charismatic and likable and interesting. You never really see him as a bad guy. And he gives all of his characters a tick or something that he attaches something to. And in this movie, he calls everybody my man. You know, you my man. And it's a great performance. Again, I'm not sure why he wasn't nominated. I thought it had Oscar written all over it. And great chemistry between he and Russell Crowe. And the many great black actors that are in this movie as well. It's just chock full of them. I think at the end it received a single nomination for Best Supporting Actress for the woman playing his mother, and that was it. And you talk about me giving away passes. I used to do that. I used to get tons of passes from Warner Brothers and everybody else because they wanted film students in the movie, you know, along with the prize winners who were kind of movie coupon sluts is what we used to call them. So yeah, I used to do a trivia thing and give away passes to a movie. I think I also had a rule that you had to take somebody from the class. Did I not?
Yes, you did. I have a confession to make. I gave those passes to another student in the class. I gave them to, I think, my buddy Steven. And the reason was, although I was thrilled to win them, it was the same night I had backstage passes to the Casby Awards, the Canadian Artist Selected by You. And I had gone with a bunch of buddies. So I followed your rule and I made sure it went to another student.
Oh, that makes me happy.
Yeah. That was also the night of my mom's birthday. So I had three big things going on.
You were blessed that day, obviously.
Yeah, totally. In that same year, 2007, Denzel got behind the camera again for The Great Debaters.
And again, he played a real life character, Melvin Tolson, and a biographical film about the Wiley College debate team who were coached by Tolson. And again, we get a sense of these kids being turned into better people through the debate team. And he believed in them. He thought they were great kids. And it explored the social constructs in Texas during the Great Depression and day-to-day insults hurled at the African Americans and who dealt with lynching. They were hung at this point. So a really, really powerful film, beautifully acted by Forrest Whitaker, who has a small part. Forrest Whitaker, who has a small part in the movie. And Nate Parker, who later became famous for his movie The Birth of a Nation, which was mired in controversy in 2016 for something that had happened years before. So a solid movie, a rock solid piece of filmmaking.
Coming up next in 2009, we got another Tony Scott movie, one that I really enjoyed. It's a remake, The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I like this a lot too. I love the original, which was very good, but this one ramped it up a little bit, and I enjoyed it every bit as much. John Travolta plays a great villain.
Yeah.
He locks into it, and he plays a badass really, really well. And Denzel played the subway operator, who was the only guy that Travolta's bad guy would talk to. And it was up to Denzel to keep everybody on the train alive. And there's a give and take constantly between the two of them. They don't share any big scenes together, but I really liked the movie. I thought it was thrilling. I thought it was exciting, and it made sense. It made absolute sense. And I loved that Denzel Washington figured everything out before anybody else did. Even the cops were lost in this one, but he figured it out.
Yeah, solid entertainment. I really dug it. And I loved Travolta in it.
He had a stretch where he made some really entertaining movies before he made a great film again. He made The Book of Eli in 2010, which was an apocalyptic film in which he played a blind man. He made Unstoppable, which was a pretty decent film with Chris Pine. And then he made Safe House with Ryan Reynolds, the Green Lantern. which was a decent film. He played a military guy who'd been taken to a safe house by Ryan Reynolds, knowing what's going to happen, knowing they're coming for him, and that this kid guarding him is going to have to save him. And that was entertaining as well. In 2012, he made Flight and returned to the Oscar circle for the first time in many, many years. He plays Whip Whitaker, an airline pilot who is also a drug addict and an alcoholic. And your love of John Goodman must be satisfied here because he is terrific in this movie as his drug supplier.
Yeah.
And he knows that the quickest way to end a hangover is to snort cocaine. And when the engines or landing gear or something fails on his plane, he actually inverts it. He flies it upside down before crashing it into a field. And the only reason they live is because of his actions. But he was bombed while he did it. And he covers up that he was bombed. He does everything in his power to lie and cheat, and then finally admits it because they're turning their attention to a friend of his who died. And he knows she wasn't a drunk, and they're portraying her as a drunk. And I don't think Denzel Washington ever shone brighter on screen in the moments he admits that it was him. I thought he found his humanity and his decency in that scene. And for Flight, he was nominated for an Academy Award, and he deserved to be.
Yeah. Movies about alcohol abuse always hit home for me for obvious reasons, but he's absolutely brilliant in it. Yeah, I mean, he gets the nuances bang on. I just want to take a very brief step back because of something you said. I think that we can forget and forgive Ryan Reynolds for Green Lantern since Deadpool.
No, you don't get forgiven for that.
Deadpool even killed Ryan Reynolds before he
Yes, he did, but he still made the fucking Green Lantern, so he never gets forgiven for that. He can read. He read the script, and he still did it.
All right, fair enough. That's a subject for another show. Okay, so in 2013, he got together with Mark Wahlberg and made Two Guns.
Yeah, kind of a throwaway movie, and one of those ones that I don't quite know why he did it. I actually started to think he was on the downside of his career, and he shut me up very quickly when he made Fences. You know, Two Guns is what it is. It's entertaining. They have some nice barbs going back and forth. But, you know, I wasn't out of the movie theater 2 minutes, and I'd forgotten about it entirely and hadn't thought about it until you mentioned it just now.
Yeah.
That's how forgettable it is. The same with The Equalizer. The Equalizer was at TIFF. And I'm watching it thinking, what the hell is this doing at a film festival? And, you know, I liked the relationship he had with Chloe Moretz. And I liked that he was a badass who just went absolutely postal on people that were betraying other people. I liked all that. But was it necessary, really? Did we really need to have The Equalizer and the sequel, The Equalizer Part 2? I don't think so.
What were your thoughts on The Magnificent Seven?
I liked it. I really liked it. Did we need it? I don't believe we did. I think the chemistry between he and the rest of the cast was absolutely perfect. And I liked the casting quite a lot. You know, Chris Pratt is endlessly watchable and has got big, fat movie star charisma. And all of his scenes with Denzel were just, you know, two stars who shine bright, man, going at it. And it had one major flaw for me. At the end of the movie, there's narration by the young woman that brought them to town in the first place. And she's talking about what had happened in the town and how they drove out the bad guys. And she says it was magnificent. And I just, oh, fuck, could you be any more cliched? And again, a movie at TIFF, surprisingly a movie at TIFF, the opening night movie at the festival.
All right, let's talk about Fences. Again, he's directing.
Absolute masterpiece. Again, he's directing, you're right. Fences had been batted around since the late 1980s. Eddie Murphy, at one point, owned the right to Fences and wanted to play the son, but he was too old by the time they were ready to make the movie to play the son. So rather than give it to somebody else to make, he sat on it. He sat on a movie about the Black experience that would have told the truth about his people and about what they've gone through. And finally, Denzel bought the rights back from him. He sold them to Denzel Washington. Yeah, I think he was shamed into doing it. And before they went to camera, they went to Broadway and brought the play to Broadway. And Denzel won a Tony for Best Actor for Fences on Broadway. Then he makes the movie, and it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And he wins the Screen Actors Guild for Best Actor. But that same year, Casey Affleck made a movie called Manchester by the Sea and gave a performance for the ages. So there's no way Denzel's going to win Best Actor over Casey Affleck. Viola Davis was a worthy winner of Best Supporting Actress, although category fraud. She should have been up for Best Actress because she was the leading actress. A brilliant film and a absolutely powerful piece of filmmaking about the Black experience. And baseball, surprisingly. Baseball is a common thread moving through these movies. And other than Malcolm X, this is Denzel Washington's greatest performance.
I remember TIFF 2017 when we were there together, you talking about this next movie. I actually didn't get to a screening of it, Roman J. Israel Esquire.
The movie we saw at TIFF, the movie I saw at TIFF, was not the movie released in the theaters. Quite often at TIFF, they'll bring the movie in and they'll get a reaction from the audience. And if they like it, they'll let it go. If they don't, they'll recut it. And Roman J. Israel Esquire was seriously recut. You know, there were elements of the whole film were gone. He plays an oddball lawyer who's a little out of step with everything. You know, he wears the same suit. He defends impossible cases, but because he's talented, they keep him around. And then they stumble on this massive case that he's the only guy that can win. And it costs him his life. So, you know, he obviously believed in it. It's a great performance from Denzel, and he was again nominated for an Academy Award. My worry, my great fear, was they were going to give him the Academy Award because they hadn't given it to him for Fences, and they've done that in the past. But they didn't. Incredibly, they didn't. They awarded it to somebody else.
Gary Oldman?
Pardon?
Was it Gary Oldman?
It was Gary Oldman, who didn't deserve it either, but that's where it went. And you know what? I decided I'd have rather seen Denzel win it than Gary Oldman.
I am adamant about who should have won that Oscar. Someone who was not nominated. It absolutely should have gone to Andy Serkis for War for the Planet of the Apes.
Well, I don't dispute that he should have been nominated, but I would have given it to James Franco for The Disaster Artist,
Right.
or Christian Bale for Hostiles.
Right. Oh, okay. You know, that's fair. You mentioned The Equalizer 2. I don't think there's much to say about it.
Well, the only other thing that he's got coming is Macbeth, which should be released later this year. It's going to have Denzel Washington, Frances McDormand, Brendan Gleeson, a great cast, you know, a really solid cast. And it's directed by one half of the Coen brothers, Joel Coen. Ethan is not any part of this movie, which is quite rare. And I'm looking forward to it because I think it's a ballsy move having a black actor play Macbeth.
Yeah, it's going to be called The Tragedy of Macbeth, and Joel Coen is doing it alone. It marks the first time one of the Coen brothers will work without the other.
Yes.
It was announced on March 26th that filming had been postponed due to COVID, so I guess we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, one to look out for. Let's do a wrap up here. You want to talk a little bit about his stage work?
Yeah, his stage work has been, you know, off and on all through his career. The Soldier's Story was one of his first great plays. He'd been in Coriolanus at the Joe Papp Public Theater in '79 and played Richard III in 1990 at the Joe Papp Public Theater. He gave a brilliant performance as Marcus Brutus in Julius Caesar in 2005, Fences in 2010, which won him a Tony. He did a remount of A Raisin in the Sun, the famous play, in 2014. And in 2018, he played Hickman in The Iceman Cometh, the famous O'Neill play. So, you know, he moves back and forth from the stage whenever he feels like it. He thinks he needs the stage to stay fresh. And a lot of actors do, you know, some do. Not all film actors do, I should say that, but Denzel certainly does. And his plays sell out. They are sold out well in advance.
Yeah, I can only imagine trying to get a ticket for that.
Oh, God. Well, the guy is great. The guy is absolutely phenomenal. And you know what? I've interviewed him 3 times. He's a really cool guy. He's a nice man.
Any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to see from Denzel Washington in the future? Maybe something we haven't seen yet.
I don't know that he's done anything that that we haven't seen or that he's capable of. I just hope he finds another role that offers him the type of range that Malcolm X did, the Hurricane did. I hope we see a couple more great performances from Denzel Washington, because I do believe he's truly, truly a great actor. Maybe Mandela. He doesn't look anything like Mandela, but so what?
Yeah, Denzel dominates. All right, I think that's it. John, thanks again.
Okay, thank you.
There you have it, folks. Episode number 29, Denzel Domination. Thanks to all our listeners for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Check out this, all past, present, and future episodes of our podcast. Hit us up on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, but especially that YouTube channel. Coming up in the near future, we're going to do an episode on Johnny Depp. Going to take a spotlight at the 1960s, and I got my special guest, my buddy Peter Hatch. He's an independent filmmaker. We're going to talk about all comic book movies, non-superhero stuff. Until next time, see you at the movies.